Asterisk, the sky of Zelleranine was red and gold as the sun began to set. Strange birds flew in circles above the tall, glowing trees. The wind carried the sound of howling creatures from deep inside the forest. On top of a high cliff, a young alien girl stood alone. Her name was Vera, and she was a scientist from the city of Kyrene. She had dark purple skin, silver eyes, and long hair tied with gold rings. She held a scanning device in her hand, watching the readings on the screen. Suddenly, the device beeped. She looked up. A small metal ship was falling from the sky, fire trailing behind it. The ship slowed down, then landed softly in a nearby valley. Vera's heart beat faster. "That's not one of our ships," she said. She zoomed in with her lens. A symbol appeared on the side of the ship, a blue circle with a white star. She had seen that symbol before, in old data files. "Human," she whispered, "a real human." Vera activated her comm. "This is Vera. Calling Science Base Kyrene," she said. "A human ship has landed in Sector 9. I'm going to investigate." The voice on the other end shouted, "Stay away. That's Shadowfang territory." But Vera had already turned off the comm. She stepped onto her hoverboard and flew down toward the valley. Down below, the human explorer had already stepped out of his ship. His name was Commander Jake Carter. He wore dark armor, light but strong. With a helmet hanging from his belt, he stood tall and calm, looking at the strange trees and the glowing plants. Jake took a deep breath and smiled. "Smells like Earth, but sharper," he said. He pulled a small scanner from his belt and pointed it at the ground. "Big tracks," he muttered, kneeling down. "Something heavy passed through here, very recently." Vera stayed hidden behind a large red rock, watching him. He didn't seem scared. Even though this place was known as the Death Zone, no one came here. Not soldiers, not hunters, not even drones. Because this was where the Shadowfang lived, the most feared creature on the planet. Jake pulled out a small black box, opened it, and placed a chunk of dried meat on the ground. He looked up into the forest. "I know you're watching," he said quietly. "Come meet me." Vera's eyes widened. Was he calling the beast? Was he crazy? She floated forward, her hoverboard silent in the wind. "You don't belong here," she said firmly. Jake turned, surprised but not afraid. "You must be local," he said with a small smile. "I'm Jake, from Earth." Vera stepped off her board, keeping her distance. "I'm Vera," she replied, "scientist of Kyrene City. You need to leave now," she added. "This place is dangerous." Jake looked back at the forest. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." Vera frowned. "You came looking for the Shadowfang." "Not to fight," Jake said. "To learn." "That's not possible," Vera said. "The Shadowfang kills everything it sees." Jake smiled again. Maybe it hasn't seen a human before. Vera was silent, confused. She had studied the Shadowfang all her life. It was big, taller than a tree, fast like lightning, with black skin that shimmered in the dark. Its teeth could break metal. Its roar could freeze blood. It was the perfect predator. "Your people fear it," Jake said, walking slowly into the forest. "But I've met worse." Vera blinked. "Worse?" Jake laughed softly. "Ever heard of earth lions? Or something called a grizzly bear?" "No," Vera said, "but they sound smaller." Jake gave her a look. "It's not the size," he said. "It's how you face it." He kept walking, disappearing between the glowing trees. Vera stood. "They're frozen." She didn't know why, but her feet began to move. She followed him, keeping silent, staying in the shadows. The forest got darker with every step. Strange lights moved in the distance. The air became thick, heavy. Suddenly, the scanner in Vera's hand began to flash red. A warning, the Shadowfang was near. Up ahead, Jake stopped. He dropped to one knee and placed the dried meat gently on a rock. He didn't raise a weapon. He just waited. Then, from the shadows, something massive stepped forward. Two glowing red eyes opened. A deep growl filled the forest, shaking the ground. Vera gasped and covered her mouth. It was the Shadowfang, but Jake didn't move. He didn't run. He just looked at the creature and whispered, "I'm not your enemy." The Shadowfang growled again. Then it stopped. It sniffed the air, then the meat. Then it looked at Jake and didn't attack. Vera couldn't believe what she saw. No one had ever survived this close. No one. Her heart raced. She knew now. This human was different. Very different. Asterisk, the Shadowfang stood still, just a few steps away from the human. Its eyes glowed like fire in the shadows, and its breath was heavy, hot, and loud. Its long claws dug into the soft earth, ready to strike if it sensed danger. But Jake didn't move. He stayed on one knee, hands open, body calm, eyes steady. He didn't show fear, only curiosity. The Shadowfang leaned closer, sniffing the air. Then the dried meat, with one smooth motion, it opened its wide mouth and swallowed the meat in a single bite. Vera couldn't believe what she was seeing. No creature had ever stood so close to the Shadowfang and lived. Not even the warriors with energy blades or the hunters with plasma guns. But this human, with no weapon in hand, was alive and calm. The Shadowfang gave a low growl, not angry but deep and full of thought. It turned its head, looked directly at Jake, then slowly backed into the trees and disappeared. The forest became quiet again, too quiet. Jake stood up slowly, brushing dust off his pants. Vera stepped out from behind the glowing tree, her voice low and sharp. You should not be alive. Jake turned to her and gave a crooked smile. But I am. She walked closer, her eyes never leaving his. How did you do that? Jake shrugged. I treated it like a living thing, not a monster. Vera shook her head. It is a monster. Maybe to you, Jake said, but maybe it's something more. She looked down at the spot where the shadow fang had stood. The prints were huge, deep, and shaped like nothing else on the planet. There was power in those steps, and mystery too. Jake pulled out a small recording device and played back the moment. The growl, the sniff, the way it moved. He watched with the same interest Vera had seen in her best teachers. You study it? She asked. I study everything, Jake said. That's what explorers do. Vera wanted to tell him to leave, to go back to his ship. But something inside her whispered that this was just the beginning. No one had ever tried to understand the shadow fang, only avoid it or kill it. But now, this human wanted to learn from it. Jake started walking deeper into the forest again. Vera followed, against her own rules. You can't just wander in, she warned. There are more dangers than just the shadow fang. I hope so, Jake replied, grinning. I didn't come all this way for just one surprise. As they moved through the thick trees, the light around them dimmed. Bioluminescent plants glowed softly, casting blue and green shadows on their faces. The air was cooler now, and the ground felt different. It was wet and soft, covered in moss and strange flowers that pulsed with light. Suddenly, Jake raised a hand. Stop, he whispered. He knelt down again and pointed. Another set of tracks, smaller but fresh. Something else passed through here, he said. Something fast. Vera leaned closer, scanning the tracks. Forest striders, she said. Pack hunters, sharp legs, move in silence. Jake nodded. Do they usually follow the shadow fang? No, Vera said. They fear it. Jake looked up toward the dark branches. Then why are they here? The answer came in the form of a distant scream, short, sharp, and then nothing. Both of them froze. Jake stood slowly, eyes scanning. The trees, we're being watched, he said quietly. Vera nodded. She could feel it too. Something was near, and it wasn't friendly. A sudden rustle in the leaves, a flash of movement. Jake spun and drew a flare from his belt. He tossed it high, into the air. The red light exploded above them, lighting up the forest for a few seconds. In that flash, they saw them. 5 long-legged creatures clinging to the trees, their bodies thin and sharp like knives. Their eyes glowed white, and their mouths dripped with dark slime. The forest striders. They didn't attack. Not yet. They watched, tilting their heads in perfect silence. Then one of them let out a high-pitched cry. It was a signal. Run, Vera said. Jake didn't argue. They turned and sprinted through the forest, weaving between trees and vines. The striders followed, not running, but leaping from tree to tree, getting closer. Suddenly, the path opened into a wide clearing. Jake stopped, Vera just behind him. They were trapped. The striders closed in, surrounding the edge of the clearing. Vera raised her scanner to defend herself, but she knew it wouldn't help. Jake reached into his pack and pulled out another piece of dried meat. He held it high, then tossed it into the shadows behind them. A deep growl returned, louder this time. The trees shook. The wind stopped. The shadow fang returned. It leaped from the shadows and slammed into the lead strider. Bones cracked, creatures screamed. The others scattered in fear, vanishing into the trees. Jake stood there, calm again. The shadow fang looked at him, then turned and walked away. Vera stared at Jake in disbelief. You called it? She asked, her voice shaking. Jake gave her a half smile. I guess it's starting to like me. This time, Vera didn't argue. For the first time, she believed the impossible, and she wondered what else this human was going to do on her planet. The shadow fang disappeared into the trees like a ghost, its dark shape swallowed by the forest's light and shadow. Jake and Vera stood in silence, the clearing still full of tension and the sharp scent of fear. The crushed body of the forest strider lay broken on the ground, black slime dripping into the glowing moss. Vera had seen death before, but this was different. It wasn't just power, it was protection. Jake knelt beside the dead strider, studying the wounds. One strike, he said quietly, fast and clean. Vera watched him, still trying to understand how this human moved so calmly around death. You think it came back for you? She asked. Jake didn't look up. I don't know, he said, but I gave it food, not fear. The air shifted again, quieter than before, as if the forest was watching them. Jake stood up and looked in the direction the shadow fang had gone. Let's follow, he said. Vera's eyes widened. Are you serious? She didn't kill us, Jake said. That means something. Vera hesitated, then followed him once more. They walked for hours, deeper into the jungle, into areas no maps covered. Vera's scanner lost signal. Her cum went dead. Jake didn't need them. He followed footprints, claw marks on trees, crushed plants, and the faint scent of blood and ash. Eventually, they reached a place where the trees opened up, a hidden valley, untouched, ancient, glowing with strange plants and quiet. light. In the center stood a massive stone, black and smooth, covered in markings neither of them could read. At its base, the shadow fang lay curled in a deep, slow sleep. Jake raised a hand and motioned Vera to stop. He stepped forward alone, one slow step at a time. The shadow fang's ear twitched, but it didn't move. Jake placed something gently on the ground, another piece of food, but this time with water. Then he sat down a few meters away and waited. Vera stayed back, half hidden behind a tree. Watching every move, the beast opened one eye, golden and deep, then slowly stood. It walked to the offering, sniffed it, then drank the water first. It ate slowly, not with hunger but with trust. When it finished, it didn't leave. It lay down again and closed its eyes. Jake leaned back against a tree trunk, silent, calm. Vera stepped closer now, still unsure if she was dreaming. No one has ever reached this far, she said. Jake opened one eye and smiled. Sometimes, you just have to listen. Vera sat beside him, not too close, but not far either. I've studied this creature since I was 10, she said. We called it a killer, a demon, a nightmare. Jake nodded. That's how humans once saw wolves. What's a wolf? Vera asked. A predator, he said. Smart, proud, dangerous, and loyal. She looked again at the shadow fang. Its breathing was slow, peaceful. It was hard to believe this was the same beast that had torn apart drones and patrols. Do you think it understands you? She asked. I think it understands kindness, Jake replied. That's rare on this planet, Vera said softly. Then maybe it's time for something new, Jake said. A loud crack echoed from above a drone. Flying low, scanning the area, Jake jumped to his feet. Pulling Vera behind the stone, the drone hovered, then beeped sharply. A red light blinked under it. Target acquired. The shadow fang raised its head slowly, then stood. The drone fired, a warning blast. But the beam struck the stone and sizzled. The beast let out a deep roar, louder than before, shaking the valley. The drone paused, then turned and retreated fast. Jake looked at Vera. Someone's looking for us. Vera touched her wrist device. Base command must have tracked me before signal loss. They'll come, Jake said. They'll come with weapons, Vera replied, voice flat. She looked at the shadow fang, who now stared into the sky. Alert, quiet, thinking. You need to leave, she said to Jake. I'm not leaving her, Jake said, pointing to the beast. She'd be hunted. She saved our lives. Vera didn't know what to say. Everything in her training said this was wrong, impossible, dangerous. But what she saw with her own eyes was different. It wasn't just the shadow fang that was changing, it was her too. The forest rustled, wind rising, birds flying away. Trouble was coming, and Vera, the alien scientist, was now standing with the one creature she had feared her whole life, and a human who refused to run. Vera stared at the black stone in the center of the valley, her fingers slowly tracing the strange symbols carved deep into its surface. The markings pulsed faintly, like they were alive, reacting to something in the air. She had never seen writing like this before, not in any archive, not in any database. Jake stood beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. The shadow fang was nearby, curled under a tree, eyes half open, always watching, always silent. This stone isn't just a marker, Vera said, her voice low. It's a message, or maybe a warning. Jake crouched next to her, brushing away moss that had grown over part of the writing. The more they uncovered, the more confused they became. Looks like a creature, Jake said, pointing to one shape, or many of them, a circle, a line, a spiral, and then something else, a glowing spot that hadn't been visible before. It lit up the moment Jake touched the edge of the stone. Vera stepped back, her breath caught in her throat. Jake didn't move. The light grew stronger, lines spreading across the stone like veins, until the full image appeared. It showed a beast, like the shadow fang, standing beside another creature, smaller, upright, humanoid. Together, they were facing a great storm, something dark and vast, with many eyes. Vera whispered, "It's a bond." Jake stared at it, his voice calm but certain. This isn't the first time. The wind picked up again, cold this time, carrying the scent of metal and fire. Vera looked toward the sky. "Ships," she said, "they're coming. Fast." Jake turned toward the shadow fang, who was now standing, head turned slightly, nose in the air. She growled softly, low and careful, not a threat, a warning. Vera's device buzzed back to life, briefly catching a signal. A message flashed across her screen. "Capture the human. Eliminate the beast. Secure the valley." Her hands trembled. "They think you're controlling it." Jake didn't laugh this time. "Typical," he said. "They see something they don't understand, so they try to kill it." The shadow fang let out a soft huff and began walking toward the stone. Then she did something unexpected. She lowered her head and pressed her snout to the base of the glowing symbol. Another section of the ground opened, silent and smooth, revealing stairs. Jake stepped back in shock. "What is this?" Vera looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "A buried chamber." No one knew. They followed the beast underground. The passage narrow and lit by the same strange light as the symbols above. As they descended, the air grew cooler, but not stale. It smelled like something preserved for a long time old. Knowledge, old secrets. The chamber opened into a wide space, filled with giant stone columns and floating lights. In the center stood another Shadowfang, or what was once one, frozen in crystal, eyes still glowing faintly. Vera stepped forward, heart racing. They lived with someone, ancient explorers. Maybe. Jake moved slowly, taking in every detail. We thought humans were the first ones to try this, he said, but this happened before. At the far end of the chamber was a curved wall covered in carvings. Vera reached out and touched one. A pulse moved through her fingers. Like the stone recognized her. The image lit up, a human-like shape reaching out to a Shadowfang. A bond, sealed in light, protecting something greater. Then the chamber shook, dust falling from above. Explosions, Jake said. They've found the valley. Vera stared at the carvings, torn between knowledge and danger. They're going to destroy everything. Jake turned to the beast. What do we do? The Shadowfang walked to the side wall and slammed her claw into it, opening a hidden path leading out of the chamber. Jake smiled. She's not just a predator, he said. She's a guide. As they ran through the tunnel, behind them, the valley began to shake again. Louder this time, ships were landing. Weapons drawn, scanners hot, orders clear. Capture the human. Kill the beast. Secure the site, but the human, the alien scientist, and the fearsome predator had already vanished into the deep unknown. And above them, the ancient stone went dark again, hiding its truth from those not ready to see it. The forest was silent now, but not peaceful. There was a pressure in the air, thick, invisible, and wrong. Birds no longer sang, and the glowing flowers had dimmed. The Shadowfang walked ahead with quiet strength, leading them through a narrow canyon covered in roots and old stone. Jake followed close behind, his steps careful but fast. Vera came last, her mind spinning with thoughts she couldn't shake. They were hunted now, not just by wild creatures, but by her own people. The command center had made a decision: destroy the predator. And anyone who stood with it. They believed Jake was using the beast, a trick, a trap, a threat, but she had seen something else. She had seen trust. A few kilometers behind them, dark ships landed like silent hammers. Soldiers in red armor spread out, scanning the ground, leaving marks that burned into the earth. Vera's old friend, Captain Ellen, stepped out of one ship. Holding a long pulse rifle, she was calm, professional, cold. We find the human, she said to her squad. We end the beast. Vera's name blinked on her wrist screen. A message waiting. She didn't open it. She already knew what it said. Orders, or worse, warnings. They stopped near an old structure, half buried in vines. Something forgotten. By time, the Shadowfang sniffed the air and then lay down at the entrance. Silent again, Jake knelt beside her. Checking her leg, she was bleeding slightly. Not from battle, but from the energy pulse that grazed her when they escaped the valley. She's hurt, Jake said. Vera opened a small kit and handed him a vial. This will help slow the pain. Jake gently poured the liquid over the wound, whispering softly. He didn't speak to her like an animal. He spoke like she understood every word, and maybe she did. Vera watched them, something heavy growing inside her chest. She had always believed that humans were dangerous, loud, proud, careless, but Jake was none of those things. He was patient, quiet, thoughtful, and the Shadowfang, the same creature her people had feared for generations, was now calm beside him. She sat down, tired. This place, she said. I think it was a temple. Jake looked around. There are carvings again, he said, more of the same symbols. Vera nodded. The old ones were trying to tell us something. The air suddenly cracked with static. Jake's head turned. Alert. Vera's screen lit up. Someone was trying to connect. A voice broke through. Vera, this is Captain Ellen. Respond now. Your signal was found near Sector 14. She hesitated. Don't answer, Jake said. She's my friend, Vera said softly. Not anymore, Jake replied. She's following orders. Vera walked a few steps away and tapped her screen. Ellen, she whispered. Vera, Ellen's voice came clear. Tell me you're not helping the human. I'm with him, Vera said. There was silence. Then you're against us, Ellen said, her voice cold now. Don't make this worse. I've seen what you refuse to see, Vera said, her voice shaking. The human is not the enemy, and the beast is not a monster. Ellen didn't respond right away. Then her voice returned, flat and final. You have 1 hour, she said. Then we bring you in, dead or alive. The call ended. Vera stood still, not moving. Jake watched her with quiet understanding. They'll come hard, he said. She come herself, Vera replied. She's that kind of soldier. The Shadowfang growled softly. Sensing the tension in the air, she stood up and began pacing the edge of the ruin, sniffing the ground, checking the wind. Jake stood beside her, hand resting gently on her shoulder. We don't run, he said. No, Vera replied, but we prepare. They began setting traps, not deadly ones, but distractions. Smoke pods, motion triggers, false signals. Jake showed Vera how to build simple but clever snares. Tricks used by human scouts in deep jungles back on Earth. Vera was amazed. You're not just a scientist, she said. Jake smiled. I never said I was only one thing. An hour passed quickly, then the sound of boots. Quiet, but fast. Ellen had come. She stood at the entrance to the ruins. Rifle ready, eyes locked on Vera. You should have stayed out of this, she said. I stayed because I finally saw the truth, Vera replied. Ellen stepped forward, but stopped when she saw the Shadowfang. Even brave soldiers froze in front of it. Move aside, Ellen said. No, Vera answered. You'll have to go through me. Jake stepped between them. Ellen raised her rifle. The Shadowfang let out a deep roar that shook the walls. Ellen didn't fire. She lowered her weapon just slightly, her eyes wide. She's protecting you, Ellen whispered. Jake nodded. She chose to. The silence that followed was heavier than war, and in that moment, Vera realized something even more dangerous than fear had arrived. Doubt, *. The first shot came from the trees. Fast and sharp. It wasn't meant to hit, only to send a message. Jake pulled Vera back behind a broken stone wall. The Shadowfang growled, muscles tight, eyes glowing. Captain Ellen didn't wait this time. She gave the order, and red-armored soldiers moved into the ruins like shadows. They didn't speak, only scanned and aimed. Their orders were clear. Take the human, kill the beast, silence the traitor. Jake pressed a signal jammer against the stone and twisted the dial. It clicked twice, then began to hum softly. They won't call for backup now, he said, but we're still outnumbered. Vera opened her satchel and pulled out a small device, an old scout transmitter from her early training. She read it in seconds, then dropped it behind a pile of rubble. When they pass it, she said, it'll flash the same heat signal as us. Moments later, 3 soldiers took the bait, firing into the decoy. Smoke filled the corner of the ruins. Blinding them, Jake moved through the smoke fast, disabling 2 with non-lethal shots from a compact earth weapon, a sticky foam that froze limbs instantly. The 3rd soldier turned and raised his rifle. The Shadowfang was faster. She leaped over the wall with silent fury, knocking the soldier down, but she didn't kill. She stood over him, growling, daring him to move. He dropped the weapon and raised his hands, eyes wide with fear. Vera watched from behind a broken pillar, heart pounding. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was a war of truth versus lies, and she had chosen her side. From the upper ridge, Ellen watched everything, her face unreadable. She raised a signal flare, and a deep rumble echoed through the trees. Heavy footsteps, not soldiers this time, but drones, machines with 4 legs, metal, teeth, and no fear. They're bringing crawlers, Vera said. Jake nodded. They don't hesitate, and they don't stop. The Shadowfang stood tall at the center of the ruins, eyes fixed on the sound. She remembered crawlers. She had fought them before, cold machines with no scent, no heart, no mercy. Jake whispered something to her, words soft and steady. The beast tilted her head slightly, then turned and ran into the jungle. Where is she going? Vera asked. Jake grabbed her arm. She's drawing them away, but she's hurt, Vera said, voice cracking. She knows, Jake replied, and she's doing it anyway. The drones followed the trail fast, roaring like wild engines. The ground shook under their heavy legs. Jake and Vera moved in the opposite direction, deeper into the ruins, toward the buried tunnels. Every step was harder now, not just from the danger, but from the fear of losing her. When they reached the back of the ruins, a low door opened, triggered by the Shadowfang before she left. Inside was darkness, cool and quiet. The tunnel curved downward, walls glowing faintly with old alien tech. Jake helped Vera down, both breathing hard but moving fast. Far behind them, the sounds of battle began, roars, metal crashes, and high-pitched screeches. Jake stopped and turned. For the first time, he looked unsure. She's fighting alone, he said. Vera reached into her belt and pulled out a small drone, a scout eye. She launched it silently, guiding it toward the battlefield. The screen lit up with shaky images. The Shadowfang was a blur of speed and rage, tearing through the crawlers, claws flashing, teeth breaking steel. But she was bleeding, badly. One crawler clamped onto her leg, pulling her down. Another pounced on her back, stabbing with electric blades. She roared, throwing them off, but she was slowing down. Jake clenched his fists. We can't leave her. She told us to run, Vera said. Jake shook his head. She didn't say goodbye. He turned and sprinted back into the tunnel's mouth. Vera followed without another word. They came out through a side path, circling behind the battle. The crawlers were focused on the beast, unaware of the humans flanking them. Jake climbed a large tree, aimed a compact earth blaster, and fired into the crawler's main unit. The machine exploded in sparks, alerting the others. Vera tossed a grenade, not to kill, but to blind. A burst of white light stunned the remaining drones. The Shadowfang collapsed to one knee, blood on her fur, but her eyes still burning with fire. Jake ran to her side, grabbed one of the crawler blades, and used it to cut open the power core of another machine. He stood protectively in front of the beast. Now Vera joined them, her weapon drawn, both ready to fight to the end. Then something changed. The Shadowfang stood again, unsteady but tall. She let out a roar, unlike any before, and from the shadows beyond the trees, more shapes emerged. 6, maybe 7. No more Shadowfangs. silent, watching, powerful. Vera couldn't breathe. They came, she said. Jake smiled. She wasn't the only one. The crawlers paused, sensing the new danger, then they turned and fled. Not programmed to handle what was now coming toward them, the jungle filled with the soft sound of pause and breath, not a sound of death, but of something older. A family awakened, and the humans and the alien girl stood in the center, no longer prey, but part of something much bigger. The jungle was alive with shadows, but there was no fear now. The new Shadowfang stood in a circle around the ruins, silent and still. Their eyes glowed with the same ancient light that came from the valley stones. Vera stood beside Jake, unable to speak. This moment was beyond anything she had ever studied. It wasn't science, or strategy, or survival. It was something deeper, older, sacred. The wounded Shadowfang, the first one, the one who had protected them from the beginning, lay on her side. Breathing slowly, Jake knelt beside her, pressing his hand gently to her fur. She's losing too much blood, he said. Vera knelt with him, opening her kit. I can slow it, she whispered, but I can't save her alone. Then the unexpected happened. One of the new Shadowfangs stepped forward, its chest rising, eyes locked on Jake. It walked toward him slowly, then lowered its head and nudged a glowing stone from its neck, something hidden in its fur. The stone pulsed with a soft blue light. Jake looked to Vera. What is it? Vera took the stone carefully, scanning it with her damaged device. Her eyes widened. It's a memory stone, she said, and it holds medical data. The stone lit up brighter as she connected it to her wristband. A burst of holographic symbols flashed in the air. Complex healing protocols, genetic keys, ancient knowledge, left behind by whoever came before. Vera moved fast, guided by the stone, mixing the formula with a healing serum. She injected it gently into the Shadowfang's shoulder. The wound pulsed, then began to seal itself. The beast's breathing grew stronger, steadier. Jake didn't speak. He just stayed beside her, one hand still on her side. The other Shadowfangs lowered their heads, not in fear, not in threat, in recognition. The sky turned darker as more ships arrived overhead, but none dared land. The command center had received new footage from a drone that survived the fight. It showed Jake protecting the beast. It showed Vera choosing peace over orders. And it showed the impossible, a human standing in the center of a predator pack. Untouched, respected, trusted. Inside the command tower, voices argued. Plans collapsed. What they thought was a threat was now a legend in motion. Back in the jungle, the Shadowfang opened her eyes. She looked up at Jake, then slowly stood, unsteady at first. Then taller than before, she let out a soft call. Not a roar, but a sound filled with memory. The others responded, not with noise, but with movement. They surrounded Jake and Vera, then knelt. Vera's breath caught in her chest. They've accepted you, she said. Jake didn't smile. He placed his hand to his heart and bowed his head. I didn't come to tame, he said quietly. I came to understand. The pack stood again, then disappeared one by one into the jungle. Except for one, the first one. She stayed with them, calm and strong again. A new signal came through Vera's device. This is Central Command. Stand down. Observe only. No action permitted without High Council review. Vera looked at Jake, then at the beast beside them. The war is over, she said. It never started. Jake replied, we just never listened before. They walked out of the ruins together, human, alien, and predator. Not enemies, not threats, just living beings bonded by choice, by trust, and by a story the galaxy would never forget. And far above them, in orbit, more humans watched the footage as it streamed in. Soldiers, scientists, and leaders, all silent, until one general finally said what they were all thinking. Humanity just made first contact, he said, and made a friend no one thought we could.